Now, of course, we begin here with our big story. 2 police officers and a firefighter shot and killed responding to a domestic disturbance in a Minneapolis suburb. A SWAT team called to a home in Burnsville, Minnesota around 2 a.m. This is when they say there was a suspect that had barricaded himself in his home with his family, including seven children. Hostage negotiators spoke with hours with this suspect before the suspect opened fire on the officers from multiple locations inside the home. The suspect then took his own life. A woman and those children were escorted out of the home. They were unharmed. The children's ages, by the way, ranging from 2 to 15. This is just the latest example of first responders paying the ultimate price while on the job. The National Fraternal Order of Police reports that 378 officers were shot in the line of duty last year, the highest number since it began keeping records. It also says that of those officers, 46 of them were killed. So joining me now is our ABC News contributor and former NYPD Chief of Detectives, Bob Boyce. So Bob, thank you so much for being here with us. We always appreciate your time. Let's first start with talking about these domestic violence calls. We know that they are among the most dangerous calls for first responders to go out to. Why is that? What's being done?
And when you go to these things, and thank you for having me on, it's one of these things that you walk into, you know there's a contention in the room, there's often rage and anger, and you have to immediately try to get a hold of that, separate the combatants, if you will, and talk it through, and get people just to calm down to get the air out of it. However, in this instance, they knew there was a problem already. They knew he had firearms, they knew he was barricaded, and even most importantly, they knew there was children in the house, and a lot of them. So they were up against it. And everything was going that way. They were talking for hours, hoping to get him out to, disarm him as best they can, calm him down, because he was given to anger, rage. He has a history of that. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he starts shooting. And 2 officers are killed and a firefighter as well.
You know, the length of this really stands out to me, right? If officers respond there at 2 a.m., this whole thing isn't over until 8 a.m. This is some 6 hours, and it ends with 3 first responders killed. Another one is injured. We know that one of the law enforcement officers that responded was actually a crisis negotiator. So what do you know about how that could have played out?
Well, we have hostage negotiators, and that's what we call them in New York City. They go to these things immediately. We have them on call. They show up. There was plenty of time for them to get there. And you start speaking to the individual and to the family members. Everybody's trying to calm him down as much as you can. However, the best play, sometimes the best talking, the best thing you can do, suddenly there's a trigger and violence happens. So it is surprising they had him in dialogue for over 4 hours, it seems. That's unusual. For them to then open fire on the officers, killing one at the scene, from what I understand, and shooting the other 2, then going to the window and start shooting at an armored vehicle outside, what we call Bearcat, which is an extraction vehicle in case things go bad there. So at some point, the triggers went off and he just went completely out of it and started shooting. This is a tough environment to go into. I've had friends killed in the line of duty at domestic incidents. We just lost 2 officers just 2 years ago. Wilbur Mora and Jason Rivera, 2 detectives killed in Harlem. Same exact situation. Next thing you know, you're walking into an environment, and all of a sudden, there's people open fire on you. Tough times in these domestic incidents are one of the biggest problems we have in law enforcement. That and dealing with mentally ill people.
And as we know, this is a major problem within law enforcement, and how to respond to it, we know, is consistently being addressed, as well as with firefighters, right? The firefighter that was killed was actually providing aid to one of the injured officers. And in this age of responding to active shooting situations, how is the training differing here, especially in terms of what firefighters and EMTs go through as well?
Okay, it starts in the academy. We teach them, we do role plays, we teach them how to separate people, how to talk, how to talk people down from things. And it shows you this particular instance, you can do everything right. You can set things up, you can have negotiators there, you can have paramedics there. Everything is going fine, and all of a sudden a trigger happens and he starts shooting. But this starts at an early age in your police career or fire career. You have to understand that these things could happen to you, and you have to take measures as best you can to protect them. What I believe is these officers knew there was 7 children in that house. That's a game changer. And you're going to adjust your tactics and your strategies according to that. You can't take the action you would if he was by himself. So these things matter. I think what happened here is because there were children in the house, and thank God nothing happened to them, that really made him change different tactics, perhaps, and slow it down, and then out of nowhere, this madness happens. But you can see in his history, he never should have had guns. He should have been identified early on, and he was. He was arrested for assault too, and it's a continuation of that anger, rage, violence against women.
Wow, Bob Boyce, thank you so much for your analysis of this tragic situation. We always appreciate it. I want to bring our big story now to our panel. So joining us here today is our ABC News contributor and Sirius XM radio host Mike Muse, our ABC News political contributor and senior editor at The Dispatch, Sarah Isker, our Democratic strategist, Julie Rodzinski, and ABC News contributor and op-ed columnist for the LA Times, LZ Granderson. So thank you all for being here with us today. Mike, look, this was a small suburban police department. The community is healing right now. They're trying to deal with the loss of these 3 first responders, another one recovering. But this just has to be incredibly heavy for that community, right?
It does. So I just want to send my hearts and prayers out to the families of those who have lost their loved ones, and including the children who ultimately have lost their father. No matter what we may think of him as a shooter, that is still their father. I think that kind of the conversation has a possibility to change with this narrative, unfortunately. And I say that possibly with a silver lining is that now we're seeing the guns being turned on police officers and first responders. And so what I'm wondering as we advance this conversation is, does that create more of a sense of urgency in order to create more comprehensive gun reform and gun legislation, in particular as both parties care about law enforcement and care protecting about first responders? Can we begin to really put action behind our sentiments and how we hail them as heroes? And we want to make sure they're protected, as your guest has said, and particularly going into domestic violence situation. It was going to be so dangerous for our first responders.
Absolutely. And Sarah, you know, in the past few years, we've seen this defund the police movement nearby Minneapolis, nearby where this happened. They did vote down a measure to disband the police department in 2021, but they did resign to use, you know, some use of force practices within law enforcement there. Does law enforcement right now have the tools to do their job safely?
Here's a problem that we face. You know, when the only things you hear in the news are about police-involved shootings, and we second-guess police officers, and we wonder why they're so quick to pull a firearm at a domestic violence call or a traffic stop. It's because those are the 2 deadliest for police officers, and they happen in the flash of an eye, as we've seen here. And if you want people to go into police work, it's not for the pay. It's, you know, we consider them heroes. And if that goes away and they're vilified instead, you're going to see a drop in recruitment, a drop of people willing to do this. And that's what we're seeing across the country. You want good people going into these law enforcement jobs who are going to be willing to make those split-second decisions that are going to save 7 children's lives. And these 3 men gave, obviously, the ultimate sacrifice.
They certainly did, and we are seeing those recruitment numbers down in a lot of departments across the country. And Julie, we know the suspect did have multiple guns, large amounts of ammo. How are police supposed to then respond to a situation like that where suspects are seemingly matching or overpowering them in terms of actual firepower?
That's the problem. It's the ease with which you could buy a weapon right now in the United States, the only country, the only Western country with which you could buy weapons with such ease, is so great right now that what this means effectively is that police officers don't even know what they're facing when they show up to a domestic violence call. And we always say, you know, the one thing that could stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. But how many good guys are willing to sacrifice to this crazy gun non-control policy where people are allowed to just buy unlimited amounts of weapons that can fire seemingly unlimited amounts of rounds and take out police officers who are responding and doing their own jobs? And that's the difficulty that we're facing. We are the only country in the world, in the Western world, that has to deal with these problems. And hopefully this will be time, finally, to have a conversation, a real conversation in Congress about strengthening those gun laws.
And according to Bob Boyce, the suspect did have priors, and he said he never should have had guns, according to him. LZ, I know you've been watching this story. These first responders, they're young men, you know, at least 2 of them were. I know they're around your son's age. This stuff hits close to home.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the first thing I thought of when I saw their ages, was that they were literally the age of, you know, of my son. And I could not imagine what those families are going through right now, knowing that their children sacrificed to make the world a better place, but that sacrifice cost them their lives. You know, you have to be very conflicted about that. And as far as where do we go here nationally in terms of the conversation, listen, it's been repeated numerous times. This individual should not have had a gun based upon the priors. The problem is that you still have elected officials who are beholden to the NRA who do things like try to pass bills that allow people with domestic abuse priors to have guns. That's a case actually in Texas, as a matter of fact, that was just argued last year, allowing people with these priors in domestic violence cases to still be allowed to have their guns. So, you know, if there's a direction we can go to from here, perhaps is finding a way to address one specific thing. We can't solve all of our gun issues with one piece of legislation, but we can target more smartly. And this seems to be one of those examples in which we may be able to find people who are supporters of first responders, particularly the police union, to help push elected officials to close this one particular loophole.
This guy was, we think, illegally possessing these weapons. We need more prosecutors. We need more police to actually enforce those laws that we have, because he wasn't supposed to have these guns in the first place. New laws don't do any good if you're not willing to spend the money to enforce them.
Lots of work to be done, clearly. Mike, Sarah, Julie, and LZ, our thanks to you as always.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.